And we're live.
Wonderful. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Facebook Live on Equal Pay Day. My name is Ashley Lidow. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the Director of Policy and Government Relations for the Women's Rights and Empowerment Network, WREN. We are a nonpartisan nonprofit right here in South Carolina to build a movement for the health, economic well-being, and rights for women and girls. And I'm delighted to be joined by Representative Wendy Brawley tonight to talk on Equal Pay Day about an act to establish pay equity in South Carolina and what it really means for our state. Representative Brawley, thank you so much for joining us tonight. I'm just delighted you could be with us.
Thank you so much for having me. This is an important day, so I am delighted to be here with you.
Awesome. Well, just for our viewers, I'll give a little background. We say it's Equal Pay Day, but what does that mean? It means today marks the day in 2021 that the average woman has to work to catch up to what an average man made in 2020. So they could potentially work all of 2020 and take a vacation from January till now, while the average woman has to keep working just to catch up in wages. And I'll make sure that everybody notes that that's all averaging women together. So that does not take into account racial impacts to the gender wage gap. And I want to highlight that those dates. So for Black women, that date is in August, and for Latin women, that date is all the way in October. So when we're thinking about the wage gap, we really need to be thinking about gender and race coming together and what impact that has on the people of our state. Representative Brawley, we know that the wage gap is here, it's real, and it is just absolutely absurd that we're still dealing with it. So you have a piece of legislation, Act to Establish Pay Equity. I would love for you to tell our viewers just really what the bill does and just like the key components and why it's so important.
Well, thank you. And thanks to WREN for hosting this event tonight. Pay equity is really critically important, especially now for women in the midst of this pandemic. And I know we'll talk about that in a little bit. But the bill itself, the House Bill 3183, currently is in the Ways and Means Committee. We are working to get that moved. But what the bill will ultimately do, if it's passed, is it will create a level playing field for women. And that's really important as we look at the wage gap, because some things that happen with regard to wages and salary, they're inadvertent perhaps. Other things are probably more intentional. And what this bill intends to do is address both the inadvertent and the intentional. For example, the bill would make it unlawful to ask a woman or any applicant their previous salary. And why is that important? It really is important because that starts them on a path toward inequity. Because in most instances, women are paid more or less than men to begin with. And if they're brought into a new work environment based upon their last or previous salary, the likelihood is that disparity will continue. So that's an important unintentional, I think, sometimes consequence of just what's on the application. The other thing that it will do is it'll make it easier for women to understand and access what the salary range is for a particular position, because that's not often shared. In some professions it is, but in many jobs that you go for here as women or men, you are not aware of what the range for the salary is. So this would become information that would be available to you as an applicant so that you can best determine whether there is a disparity. One of the other things that it will do is it'll make certain that if you do ask for information on what the salary of your counterpart is, that doesn't become an infraction against your employment status. There are places in South Carolina and in other places where even if you query as to what another person is making, that's grounds for some type of employment action against you. They consider salary to be private and confidential, and you are not allowed to discuss it. Well, how are you to ever know that there's a disparity if you can't even ask right. what someone next to you who's doing the same work is making? So these are just a few of the things that the Pay Equity Act will do once passed to help level that playing field. And of course, it'll give rise to actionable cases for women who feel as though that they have been discriminated against. But essentially, this is a bill, believe it or not, that we need in 2021 to protect so that women aren't discriminated against in the workplace. Because we know the facts bear out that in fact they are when it comes to salary and work and career.
Thank you. And for those of us just joining, I want to let you know I'm here with Representative Wendy Brawley talking about an act to establish pay equity. It's really an incredible bill. And Representative Brawley, your bill not only tries to address what happens after there is discrimination potentially happening and what remedies there might be for those who experience it, but your bill also addresses prevention measures. You had mentioned that transparency piece and that not asking the salary history. So you're really going after trying to prevent discrimination, and then also if there was discrimination to go after that. So it's really a comprehensive policy, and really just applaud you for going after that. I also want to raise for our viewers that the bill doesn't just address gender. It makes sure that the pay is really truly based on business factors. Absolutely. And so it's not the explanation in it includes other classes. So it is not just a gender-based bill. You can't base your pay discrimination on race, on disability status, on sexual orientation, gender identity, in this piece of legislation. So this bill really applies to all South Carolinians and will benefit everyone to ensure that their pay is set really well. I would love for you to touch on why you think this is part of a crucial COVID recovery. We've definitely seen that the COVID-19 pandemic is a gendered crisis when there was schools closed and there was no childcare, and most of the frontline workers were predominantly women, specifically Black women, trying to work and take care of families in an unprecedented time. I just wonder how you see this as something that's absolutely crucial to building back better.
Well, I think you hit on a lot of good points, and that is, and it was interesting that I was listening to a news report, I think it was in December, that talked about the number of jobs, aggregate number of jobs that have been lost in the country. I think it was like 140,000 jobs that month. All of those jobs were lost by women. And because of the things that you mentioned, COVID required someone, in the case of a household with children, to be there with children because schools and childcare centers were no longer open for health reasons. And so many women had to give up the jobs that they did have, which were already a gap between what they should have been earning in most instances and what they were actually earning, and actually come home. And for some of those women who could not come home and do their work, they were essential workers, as you mentioned, the people that we depend on every day, who are working at grocery stores and convenience stores and pharmacies and in healthcare. These are people who are adversely affected by COVID and still remain so affected by COVID. So we have to really look at this as an opportunity. COVID, believe it or not, as negative as it is in terms of its circumstances, creates for us an opportunity to bring awareness to this problem and how much women have suffered as a result of the pandemic, because they've taken on totally different roles as teacher and as worker, as home worker, because they had the privilege in some instances of bringing their work home to work in the house, cottage working as we refer to it. But it really took a toll on a lot of what women can do and how they're able to do it. And in some instances, as I said, many women literally had to leave the workforce because they could not deal with the issue of taking care of children, making certain that children were doing schoolwork at home and still being able to do their jobs from home. So this is a time for us to look at the disparities, look at our situation as a state, and we're doing it as a nation. I hope South Carolina is not left out, and really try to figure out how can we close the gap. And, technology was an issue, jobs were an issue, healthcare was an issue. All these things fell disproportionately on women. And we know that to be the case because the numbers bear it out. The data says so. And hopefully once we are able to actually get a debate on this bill and people see what's in the bill, because it's not just a women's bill, it's a family bill. It's really, it's going to secure the family financially. And if we can do that, we all know that finances usually creates all kinds of other issues if we don't address them. So if we can close the gap for women, especially financially, I think it will certainly lead to prosperity in so many other ways, because many women are working 2 and 3 jobs because of the pay gap and the pay disparity that they're experiencing in the workplace.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you raised up how this is actually a prosperity bill. So we're addressing the wage gap, but this is about families' prosperity and being able to live and thrive in our state. And some of the key points that we point out when we are just trying to educate folks on the wage gap and what it really means for families, we did a campaign, I hope you saw during the week, and we'll be posting more photos of the average the lifetime earnings that are lost by women. So a Latina woman in South Carolina loses $900,000 to the wage gap in a lifetime, so a 40-year career. And we try to imagine what could that mean for that family? That's childcare payments, that is student loan payments, that is buying a house, that is investing in healthcare for themselves and their family members. So really reimagining what closing the wage gap it's just going to do for our society as a whole. So you had talked about where the bill is now. So H 3183 is assigned to Ways and Means. You have tried to get it assigned to the proper committee.
Yes,
Judiciary. You work hard every day to try to get this bill heard. So I would love to hear a little bit more about where the bill's at, and if you could lead that into how we as advocates can help push those in the chamber to get the bill assigned to the right committee and then for them to actually take action.
Excellent questions. The bill is now housed in Ways and Means, which is an unusual place. As you know, I filed this bill previously and it has been in Judiciary. I think rightfully Judiciary is where it should be. So the first challenge is getting it moved to the appropriate committee. I attempted to do that on the House floor, but in order to do that, it has to be unanimous. No member in the House can object when we ask the speaker to move a bill that he has assigned, in my opinion, to the wrong committee. We had one objection, so that prevented it from actually moving at that point. I will be making that attempt again to get it in the right committee. And once that happens, it becomes getting it on an agenda for a hearing. And that is critical, because if it does not get that hearing, it would be virtually impossible to debate it on the House floor. So at that point is when I need people power. And that's when I need members in the public, men and women, to reach out to their local legislators in the House of Representatives and contact them, whether they're on the Judiciary Committee or the Ways and Means Committee or not. If it has to stay in Ways and Means, contact your legislator, ask them about 3183. Ask them, what do they have against paying women who are doing the same work as men, or anyone who's doing the same work, comparable work, a comparable pay? And most people will tell you, well, I don't have a problem with it. Then say, we need your help to make certain that this bill gets on the agenda. There is a way that I can request a hearing, but to be honest with you, I've attempted to do that in bills past. We need people power to make certain that the hearing is meaningful and that the public has an opportunity to come into the hearing process. That is really the only place in the legislative process that the public gets a voice, other than when you elect your people to represent you. So getting that hearing is really critical. Contacting your legislator in the House is very critical, especially if your legislator serves on the Judiciary or the Ways and Means Committee. The other thing that I would suggest that people can do is to write letters to their local newspaper. We have got to start making noise about the things that are important to us, because I can assure you, we get tons of mail, email, and calls from people for bills that I think are not a priority. And suddenly they become a priority. So if this is a priority, and it should be for South Carolina, there are only a few states in the country that don't have a pay equity law, and we're one of them, then I would suggest that, you know, we go on a letter writing campaign to our local editorial boards and newspapers and TV stations saying that this bill is important. It needs to happen in South Carolina. We have a lot of women who are heads of households in South Carolina who surely could benefit from this bill. And the other thing is just to make your presence known if in fact we get that hearing, which I pretty intend to make certain that we do, that you're there. Right now, we are operating in the COVID world, I say. And so there's not a lot of opportunity to personally participate at a hearing, but you can participate online. You can do the hearing by Zoom, and we do that very often if you're not able to come to the Capitol, to the Block building and actually sit in the hearing room. Those are the things that the public can do to help us move the needle and push the bill forward.
Thank you for that. And I really want to just lift up that people power that's so important for this piece of legislation. They cannot ignore us if we're all together and united, but we have to make sure that we're present. And you had mentioned contacting your legislators. We at WREN try to make it as easy as possible to take those first steps into advocacy. So we do have an action link that directs you specifically when you type in your address to your House member, and it is sample email language that will ask them if they will support the bill and if they'll actually co-sponsor it. So to take that next step, because that's a real endorsement of a policy for somebody to sign their name. You already have an amazing co-sponsor list, bipartisan support. I think it's almost 30 people. Like you really have been working very, very hard to make sure that those inside the chamber know that it's a priority that they should be working on, but we really need to be giving you that support on the outside. So people power, show up in the ways that we can. I personally hope that the legislature actually keeps the virtual option, even as we move out of the pandemic. I've found that it has actually opened up advocacy opportunities for those people across the state. And we at WREN also have like how to write a letter to the editor in one of our blogs. So I know that Courtney will be able to populate that for our viewers in the comment section. And I just hope that folks, if you have questions for Representative Brawley about the bill or about really any other kind of people power advocacy tactics, we do have an expert on advocacy. Representative Brawley not only is a legislator, but is someone who knows how to mobilize and organize large groups of people and is definitely a leader in our state. So I hope that you're typing into the comment box anything that you want to ask us, and Courtney will be able to translate it over. And the links will be available on the Facebook Live for taking action towards the bill. You can always check sclegislature.gov and type in 3183 to see all the co-sponsor lists to find if your House member is a co-sponsor. I recommend that you do that. And I also really want to raise up the fact that we should be pushing our legislators, even if we assume that they're a no vote. Don't ever assume that your legislator, based on where you live in the state or based on RRD, that they're with us. We should all be working to educate and move them along. Because I've been happily surprised by the bipartisan support that we have, but that takes full power.
And I might add, Ashley, don't assume that just because this is a Pay Equity Act and we know that it will certainly improve the lot of women in our state, that women are automatically for this. It has been somewhat surprising to me that we've had a little bit of hesitation from some of the women, my women colleagues. And I have encouraged them to understand that this is, if they are satisfied in their own personal life with their accomplishments and how things have gone for them, do this for your daughters, do this for your granddaughters, because we are sending our children to schools and colleges and they're accruing debt in most instances. And that debt is going to have to be settled. And it's getting more and more expensive for our students to go to college, even if they choose to go to a state college. Making certain that the wage, the salary that they are getting is fair. It's just fundamental. And we cannot expect our daughters to expect less when they have had to compete in the classroom just like their male counterparts, and will have to compete in the workplace just like their male counterparts, but yet will be paid 10, 20, sometimes 30 and 40% less money than their male counterparts doing the same job. I'm glad to hear that you mentioned that this isn't just about women, that this bill has a broad umbrella. It's an anti-discrimination bill that says essentially, if you are doing the work and it's comparable to someone else who's doing the work, you should be paid accordingly. And I think that is only fair. Most people would agree to that. And I guess I'll say one last thing. And as you contact your legislator, please contact those ones who have co-sponsored the bill as well, and thank them, because particularly for my bipartisan supporters, it is important that they know that this bill should be bipartisan. This is not a Republican or Democratic bill. This is a family-centered bill that will help families in South Carolina through equity.
All right, I'm starting to see from the chat. Are you ready for some questions from our viewers?
I'll try my best to answer them.
Well, your best is better than a lot of other people, so I'm excited to hear what you have to say. Question from Anne: what do you think the pushback from your female colleagues is all about? Why are they hesitating?
Well, I think sometimes even when we sit in powerful positions, and I consider being a legislator one of 170 people out of 5-point-some million people, a pretty powerful position. Sometimes we're still waiting for permission to do the things that we need to do for ourselves. And so what I've been trying to do is I talk about this bill to other women, and many women have signed on, but I'm disappointed that some have not. The few that have not, it should be every woman in the House chamber, all 25 of us. It isn't. But what I've tried to do is to explain to them, this is something that we have to lead for ourselves. And we have to be the ones out front. We cannot wait on the men to tell us that this is okay. I think men are more willing to say, well, yeah, I don't want my daughter being paid less. But this is an effort that I have struggled at times to convince some women to be out front and to not wait for permission to support the bill, whether it's political permission, party affiliation permission. Do it for yourselves, do it for your daughters, do it for your granddaughters. That's the pushback I've gotten. Well, who else is signed on? Is this person on? Is that person on? Well, no, it shouldn't be about that. So that's a struggle for us. And then the other thing that I'm hearing sometimes, though not all the time, is that it's too broad. It's too broad, and it should only apply to government positions and not to private industry or private companies. We can't have the dual standards. Either we're going to be a pay equity state that protects the right to equality no matter where you work, or we're not. And right now we're not. So we're trying to fix that. But those are the two major pushbacks I get.
Thank you for constantly having those conversations. And from our point of view, this bill actually would be beneficial to employers and employees. Yesterday, Ann Warner, our CEO, had an amazing conversation with an employment lawyer. And that video is on our WREN Facebook page and our website for folks to view. But truly, the bill outlines that your pay should be set by business factors and outlines exactly how that should be. So I always find clarity is really important in my life and understanding what I should and shouldn't do. So putting the wage ranges on, not hard to do. You'd already budgeting for items, so that shouldn't be heartburn for an employer. You don't need to know the previous salary history of a person. You need to know their skill, effort, and responsibility of the job you're hiring for, and whether or not they're bringing stuff in to put them in that range. And knowing the business factors truly helps you look at whether or not they're checking the boxes of moving forward. And then you as an employer could defend against whether or not they go in that range because you have such a set standard. So from our perspective, it actually is a pro-employer, pro-employee prosperity bill.
I think
I'm wondering
you're
if,
right.
oh, go
You're
ahead.
right. I think you're right. And it also, I'm a small business person. It also really gives the employer an opportunity to really create loyalty.
Oh, yeah.
Because when employees feel as though they are being treated fairly, and they love the work that they do because they are being treated fairly, even in the most difficult jobs. We've seen that even in healthcare over the last 12 months, we've seen that. Employees tend to stay. And even when the times get a little tough, they hang in there with you because they know you've been fair to them. And you got to treat people right. And I think this bill lays the foundation for helping employers understand the importance of that to their bottom line. And I think once they experience the prosperity for them as an employer, they will realize it is a good investment to pay people equitably.
You make absolutely just incredible points, as always. Um, uh, our audience, we have a couple more minutes with Representative Brawley. Wondering if you have any other questions about how you can get more involved in the bill. We really want to emphasize that this bill is absolutely necessary for COVID recovery, for the prosperity of our families, and that we need all of you who are watching to not only take action yourself, but to encourage those that you know, maybe even do a, I don't know, 3-person challenge to talk to 3 people and have them reach out to their representative about the bill. You might all 3 have the same rep, people power. You might be moving somebody into co-sponsorship. So I have another question. Let's see. Can advocates help them overcome the hesitation by telling our stories or speaking out more? So what does storytelling do to help encourage that hesitation that you're feeling from some of your colleagues?
What an excellent question. I'm a publisher of a magazine and stories are my life. So I really think they do resonate. The things that really attract people is when they see a face and a family, and that, those decisions that they're making as an employer actually impacts the lives of the individuals. So telling those personal stories will really help. We've had a few of those women who have been really, it was straight up discrimination, share those stories in an effort to encourage others to realize that you have to take a stand in order to make things better, not only for yourself, but for others. So it is very important to share those personal stories. And in any way that we can do that through venues like this, it's really powerful. I was listening to the news before joining this call, and because it's a national payday, equity day, or equal pay day, you're hearing a lot of national news about women who are sharing those stories. Because believe it or not, a lot of people don't realize what a problem this is. And some women don't even realize that they're the ones that are part of this problem, because they are the ones who are being discriminated against, and they have no idea because of some of those barriers that we mentioned, retaliation and not being able to get the information, not being able to discuss it among your other coworkers without fear of retribution from your employer. These are things that have quelled women's ability to move forward. So any personal story is bound to do, I think, wonders for spreading the word.
Wonderful. And I have one more question. It's a process question. So it's my favorite type of question because it's about the legislative process. And folks are asking a little bit more clarity on what happened with the bill getting assigned to the Ways and Means Committee and what that really means versus getting assigned to judiciary, and how that process of really getting it moved, like emphasize how simple and yet hard getting it back it could be.
Yeah, I was surprised that it went to Ways and Means. Ways and Means really deals with state budgetary issues. That's really their focus. Right. Judiciary, on the other hand, deals with changes in the laws of South Carolina, from the most small things to big constitutional things. And so this particular bill, in my opinion, is properly and best placed in the Judiciary Committee. It's not there at the moment, but the 2 chairs of those 2 committees, Ways and Means and the Judiciary, have both agreed to allow the bill to be moved. That's an important first step. They agreed to do that. I announced that on the House floor. They didn't object. one of the other 124 members, there are 224 of us, any one of us could have objected, and it would not have been able to be moved that simply through unanimous consent. So it is a process to get it in the right committee. But here's the thing, if it stays in Ways and Means, which I hope it does not, but we still get the opportunity to exercise the process, which is requesting the hearing, getting the hearing scheduled, getting the opportunity for the public to participate. After that happens, assuming that we have that hearing, the next step becomes the subcommittee then votes on whether or not they're going to move the bill favorably to the full committee, or whether they're going to say that the bill is not moved favorably. Doesn't mean that the bill dies forever. It just means that it doesn't have the support of the committee as it moves forward, which means it'll probably get placed last on the calendar and never get to it. If it then goes from the subcommittee to the full committee and it's reviewed there, the committee then votes again, but this is the full committee in Ways and Means or in Judiciary. The interesting thing about that is that you don't, as a public person and a member of the general public, you don't get to participate in the full committee hearing like you do in the hearing for the subcommittee. So that subcommittee hearing is very important for the public to weigh in. After it gets through the full committee, it goes to the full House for debate. It gets put on the calendar, and then we work our way through that calendar to take up bills. And they're usually taken up in the order that they were placed on the calendar, but that can change too, depending upon the will of the entire body. So that just kind of gives you an idea of the process. It is a cumbersome process. It is sausage making at its best, but hopefully what happens is by the time it gets to the House floor, it may have been amended a couple of times by the subcommittee as well as the full committee based upon testimony and based upon just questions from other legislators. That's an important process, so that if there are imperfections or things that maybe we hadn't even thought of in the bill, they're corrected at the subcommittee level, so that when we get the bill to the House floor, it is properly debated and hopefully given an up or down vote. I know that was a long answer, but it's a long process, and that's only half of it. It's still got to go over to the Senate, and the same thing has to happen over there.
I always appreciate the process explanations, and it just always re-emphasizes that people power and how necessary it is for folks to start the outreach now, early, often talking to those legislators. You heard that one single legislator, not on the committee, did that objection to even getting it properly assigned. So we need everybody who cares about families in South Carolina to contact their legislator and ask them to support this bill, so that hopefully they're connecting with that objector so that they don't get up and do that objection when Representative Brawley tries to get it to that committee. And as it comes to subcommittee, WREN's always committed to making sure that we demystify the process. We will make sure that instructions on how to testify go out, talking points, we're always here to answer questions about that. So I hope that those folks who are watching see us as a resource and know that we're always here to make sure that you know what's going on, and we want you to be part of the process. That's our number one goal, is to get people involved.
And can I just make a point, because we use the term testify, and that's technically, but it really is a frightening term to most lay people to hear. You gotta testify? What do they do? It really is just a conversation. You actually just talk to the committee members about your either support of the bill or your concern or lack of support of the bill. And you may even suggest some things that might need to be included in the bill. That's all you're doing. It's not as if we're swearing you in and we're, we've got an ensemble of judges or whatnot. It's really just an opportunity for you to be heard by the subcommittee. And it is the only place typically that opportunity is afforded.
Thank you for that. And I appreciate you demystifying the process and the first start to do it. Sometimes I'm so used to testifying that.
We say it, and other people are like, but Ashley, you brought up a great point, and that is another advantage of where we are with this pandemic is that it has expanded the process, because you can participate virtually, and a lot of people do. We've had more participation in subcommittees now, I think, than we've ever had. because of the fact that people don't have to make that trek into the Capitol, try to find a park, go through security. They can sit at home or on their job or wherever they may find themselves at the time that we're doing the hearing and sign up to participate. And I honestly think that that opens the door for a lot more opportunities for people in the public to have a voice in the process.
I agree. I hope we keep it. I really enjoy being able to hear from folks from across the state. Final comment, I'll make sure that you know this, is that we had people in the chat accept the 3-person challenge. So thank you,
Yay.
challenge 3 people to make sure that they know about the wage gap and the bill that would address it. And people are all commenting that they're so appreciative that you took this time, Representative Brawley, and for your leadership.
Glad to do it.
I echo their thanks for your leadership in the state. The state definitely needs you. And I just always appreciate what you do for us. So with that, I hope everyone is having a great Equal Pay Day and are able to share all the content. And this video should hopefully be ready for anybody to watch on any other Equal Pay Day and take action. So thank you, Representative Brawley.
Thank you. You all have a wonderful evening.